Hello there, welcome to another workshop with me, Charlotte Giblin. Now this is the really exciting stage that I've talked about before at the start of these videos, which is a little bit surreal but very exciting for me because you know what this finished painting looks like. And at this point I have no idea what is going to happen on the canvas. Now, don't feel like you have to be at that stage yet. For years and years, I would only work from photographs, and that gave me a very, very good understanding of the structure of light and shade, what natural forms looked like, and over a long period of time, I built up confidence with my colour mixing, but chiefly a confidence with risk taking and not worrying too much about what happens on the canvas, particularly when you're exploring new ideas, new techniques, knowing full well you can paint over at any time. Acrylic is brilliant for this. You can keep working and working over the top of the painting, and whether it's wet, whether it's dry, you can actually manipulate the image as much as you like over a long period of time. So those risks, which are very mild risks, just trying something out on a canvas, feel very comfortable and natural for me now. But it's not something that you have to expect of yourself straight away. And this is part of the process that I want to teach you, the ability to understand the importance of light and shade, which create really strong three-dimensional structures in a painting, but also how key it is to keep building up technical expertise, technical skill, especially with colour, because that can really make the difference between bright, vibrant, energetic paintings and ones that feel quite muddy. So that's why I try and stick really closely with the primary colours, which don't have any real additives mixed into them, like white, which can really influence a blue. If you buy a blue off the shelf which has already got white mixed into it, that will really influence the way that your colours work for you. So with this one, as you know from looking at the colour list, I'm just going to get my colour palette here and my brush. I say I don't know what's going to happen on here, but I've got an idea. I woke up this morning feeling, I'd really like to explore some bright skies and maybe some water. I love painting water with palette knife. And then when I reached for my bright pink earrings with sparkles in them, I thought, oh yeah, I'm definitely going to be using some pink today. So what we have here, a great big splodge of white, which is slowly making its way down, so I'm going to have to talk quite quickly. Cadmium Yellow Light, then Cadmium Medium Yellow, Cadmium Red Medium, then we have some Quinacridone Magenta. I've said before, no idea if that's how it's pronounced, so let's call it Quin Magenta, but you might have a different version of a magenta, a violet, absolutely fine, as long as it's a pink base to emulate what I'm doing. And this is a Phthalo Blue green shade. Now, all of your colours are going to be, the tones will be ever so slightly different to mine, depending on the brand. And of course, they will look a little bit different with the lighting in the studio here and also on your screen. So as I always say, the most important thing is not the specific colours that you use, but it's the tones, it's the balance of light and shade. So getting that, the brightness, and working through the different colours and understanding how they are affecting the painting. So I'm going to start with sky. If you've done any of my videos before which deal with sky, you will know that we start with a really good undercoat of white. So this is just a cheap white that I use so much white that I don't mind at all using the cheaper ones. It's much more important to have good quality primary colours, especially if you're on a budget. Then feel free to get a cheaper white and then spend your money on better quality primary colours. which have much stronger pigments and will give you longer lasting results. Now I have taped off the canvas at the sides. There's a whole separate video on that if you are not quite sure how to tape, how close to the edge, what type of tape to use. But for me, especially when I'm using palette knife, it makes so much sense because then I don't have to worry about the paint. Case in point there, I had a big blob on the edge. I don't have to worry about the paint spilling over the edge and creating big lumps with the palette knife. I also don't have to worry about continuing the same kind of texture around the side, which is really challenging. So this is about the surface that we're looking at. Now, as I've been talking, I've done a big sort of creamy layer of white. It's wet, it's all wet, but it's not really, really thick. When I put the brush across it, and I'm going all the way off the edge, put the brush across it, it's not dragging lumps of paint. If you've got really large sort of sausages appearing, just keep blending down, try and just smooth it out a little bit. Because the purpose of this white layer is so we can blend our sky tones in really easily and get lovely smooth results, which will be very hard without using water. And adding water into acrylic totally changes the colour, the thickness, the opacity, the opaqueness of it. But it also makes them very translucent and they can start dripping down the canvas and very hard to control. So the white creates that sort of moisturising layer underneath that we can mix our colours into. Now I've taken the background white down a little bit further than halfway. The sky is not going to come that low, but it's always better to do a little bit more, and then we can bring the foreground over the top of the sky. So now what I'm going to do is just dip the corner of the brush, and you can see I'm using my large 50 brush, 50 centimeters, I think that's 2 inches. Just a little corner of the light yellow. Now I'm thinking of sort of a light emanating out. So we'll have a really bright white focus that we go to, which will seem really intense and almost squinting into the sun. So always start a little bit further away from that central point than you think you're going to want to have your paint. It's very easy to make something smaller, much harder to, no, hang on, the other way around. It's very easy to make something bigger, much harder to make it smaller. So if I start, I'm just going to do like a little rainbow shape there, right, with the yellow. Now, at this stage, I'm going to do a little bit of very sort of gentle cake mixing, which just means having the bristles at 90 degrees into the canvas. So I'm pushing this colour right into the white and then going back and forth. Don't worry about ridges at this stage because we're going to be using palette knife. This isn't about creating a really, really soft blended sky. This is about creating a great background that we can then work on top of. Now looking at that, I feel that the sky is going to be a little bit too high up. So I'm actually going to bring that yellow down a little bit. So much easier now to just reduce the size of the white space there. I'm going to bring it down, down, down. So I'm about a third of the way, getting towards half with my yellow, and I'm just going to put a little line there so I get a sense of where the horizon might be. Take it up a touch. Some people say that you really shouldn't ever do paintings which are on 50% or on, as in, you know, have a line halfway along a painting, and sometimes it really doesn't matter. It really doesn't matter where you have a horizon. If your horizon ends up exactly halfway along the painting, that's completely fine. Now, from that light yellow, I want to take, again, just a very, very small amount of the darker yellow, the cadmium yellow medium. Now, I'm starting with incredibly subtle colours at the moment, just real dots, because it's much easier to create a more intense colour than it is to lighten it. If you find that you've put on too much colour, you can make it look lighter by adding more white. But just at this stage, I'm just wanting to add colour. So I'm going to take the slightly darker yellow. I'm using the brush on the side. And now I don't need to cake mix quite so much with this one. I'm just going to continue that rainbow shape. And now put the brush halfway over the darker light and the darker yellow and the lighter yellow. So just halfway along, just to bring those two colours together. And I want to add a little bit more of the dark yellow just around the outside edge of where the dark yellow was before. So the colours are so subtle, but at this stage it's starting to get used to the colours that I'm using, starting to feel au fait with the canvas, because each day is different when we approach our painting, and my hand is just getting used to what I'm doing, those shapes, those movements, and just starting off nice and gently. Now I'm now going to move a little bit further to the red. Now the red is going to seem incredibly powerful compared to the yellow, which is such a light colour. So you might want to actually dab a bit of that off and just have the smallest amount. And again, on the outside edge, just take it round. Because of the amount of white, your red is going to appear pinkish. And you see, just having that very subtle line. Now I can add a little bit more. Now I know what it's doing in the paint. So perhaps I'll start here and just take a bit more red. Now I've put in a very solid line so you can see, because this will probably happen with you while you're just getting used to how much paint to add in. If you get a really strong line like that, just cake mix over the top. So have your bristles at 90 degrees to the canvas. Do a big sort of swirly shape all the way through, so the bristles are cutting right through the layer of paint, and then do your smooth sweep all the way around. So the most significant difference that you may be experiencing in your version is the strength of the colours, and that is simply getting used to how strong the paints are, how thick your white is, and how heavily you're applying the paint. This, again, a lot of this is going to be covered up, but it's starting to create this really lovely background tone. And I always think it's very important at the start of a painting to cover as much of the canvas as you can in your first pass. Because when you've covered up the white of the canvas and you've started to see where the different shapes are evolving for your landscape, for whatever picture you're doing, it feels completely different. You can start planning then, you can make changes, but getting something down on the canvas is really important because you can always go over it, you can always edit as you're going. Now I'm going to move on to the pink. This is going to feel very different to those colours. You can see how strong that magenta is, and really, really pinky, lovely pinky tone. And I've taken a bit more on there because I'm getting further away from that source of brightness. And I'll start at the top and again make a big rainbow curve around the outside of my shape so far, and take this one a little bit further. Because I've got it offset, I want to have the pink, because I'm feeling pink today, clearly. I want to have lots of pink coming out to the side. Now you may prefer to have the red tones, or your pink may look really different and it just doesn't feel right to your eye. And this is where you must start making decisions about your own colours that feel right for you, as opposed to following exactly what I'm doing. The techniques will be really helpful, but the colours are very personal. Now, again, I'm going to cake mix through here just to get rid of some of those lines. I'm keeping my brush around the outside so that the bars of colour, the different bands of colour are very, very separate from one another. So I've cake mixed through all of that pink, and now I go back and forth, light touch, I'm not cutting through the white, I'm stroking my brush over the top of it so the pink mixes in with that layer of white rather than breaking through all the way to the canvas surface. So here we have this lovely sort of emanating change of colour. And now I can start making a few different decisions about the layers of intensity and the layers of colour. But you have to be hyper aware now of what is on your brush. So if you're continuing to use the same brush as I will just for this section, because I'm going to carry on doing the sky getting darker and darker. But if you suddenly think, oh, hang on, I want to go back and do some yellow with this brush, obviously there's going to be pink in your brush and the colours are going to become quite different. I don't mind that. But if you want to keep this as a pure yellow and white sort of focus, which is where I'm headed at the moment, be really aware of what's in your brush, how that's going to affect the colours already on the canvas. Now I'm going to add a little bit more red just to create that stronger intensity of the transition into the pink. This red is quite warm, and by that I mean it's got a fair bit of yellow in it. So it looks a bit more tomato-y than pink. When the white is added, you can see how almost brownish it starts looking in relation to the magenta, and that's why I've put the magenta in there to get a lovely fresh pink. So you see what I've done? I've just added in quite a strong line of red, cake mix to get rid of any actual streaks, and now I'm just going to cake mix along that band in between the yellow and the red and have my brush at the halfway point where it crosses over the transition from yellow to red and very lightly stroke outwards towards the pink, and we're still getting like a lovely soft shape happening. If you've got big lumps, really dark streaks that are just, you know, you're getting worried about, you can always paint smooth lines back and forth and just start again. You can wait till it's dry, you can scrape the paint off, you can go, just leave it as it is, walk away, have a cup of tea, come back, paint over with white and just start again. It's actually really helpful to keep practicing the application of paint in a light way, so you're holding back with your colours and building up the intensity slowly. So you see with every time I'm going for paint, I'm taking a tiny amount and then building up. If you started with really, really bright yellow and really bright red, you might find that you've got very solid stripes, and that is completely fine. If that's what the background that you want to have, don't make any changes to it. But if you want to try getting a very, very subtle blend, start with very little pigment and build your way up. So I'm going to put in some stronger pink now at this edge, and there's probably just a little bit there as well. Just going to cake mix. I'm using the edge of the brush and keeping it in as narrow a space as possible, so I'm not impinging too much on the work that we've already done. And this is where it's really helpful. In my easel, I've just got plastic over the top of the easel, so I don't need to worry about what's happening with the paint at that top edge. And again, see, this white layer is still dry, sorry, still wet. It hasn't dried yet after all this time. So having a little bit extra can help hugely. And if you find that you start collecting paint on the sides and you pull it over like that, or if there's extra in the brush, it's never a problem. Just cake mix in, keep going back and forth to get that soft blend. And I say we're not doing a soft blend because we're going to go over and palette knife, but you always have the option of leaving the sky as it is. You don't have to add any palette knife detail to this sky. If this is getting you really excited, brilliant, just leave it. So I'm going to take the pink, whoops, right up into that corner. Now, before I add a tiny little bit of blue, and you can see I'm just going back and forth over this section, getting that sweeping movement, blending those colours in, but I've very much left this whole focal point for adding in something else later, or keeping it as just pure brilliant white, which we can really, really focus in on. Now with the paint that's left on my brush, remember I said it's really helpful to use up any paints that any paint you've got to fill in the canvas. That's what I said was really important. Fill in as much of the canvas. Now I know that I want to have water scene here. Now I was thinking about water earlier, and have some islands, maybe something nice on the horizon, and also beach, because I love where the waves meet the sand. So I'm going to start putting in, just scrubbing off all of the paint on the brush. Oh, I see my easel is really going for it as I'm scrubbing this on. So this is essentially the bottom quarter, let's say. I'm taking a little bit more white because I've got loads of white, mixing the white in, which acts like a moisturizing agent, acts like water, except it doesn't reduce the intensity of the paint. It in fact makes it more opaque. So I'm going to build in like a pink band at the bottom, partly because I had that left over on my canvas, on my brush, but also because I want to start reflecting some of those colours in the sand, potentially just bring a few lines up towards that corner. So it's only a small amount of the canvas already, which is still white. And maybe just because I've got them there, just add in a little bit of red and a little bit of the darker yellow. So thinking about where those colours are, just put in a line. This may get covered up by water, but it's bringing together, harmonising all of the tones that we've already used. And you see how I'm using the brush on its narrow line, narrow angle, so I can draw quite fine lines with it, and following the bottom edge of the canvas. I'm following the horizontal plane of the canvas. So I'm creating this really grounded line. I'm just mixing that red and yellow. Just I've got both of them on the edges of the brush and drawing in. Now this is almost like straight cake mixing. I'm pushing quite hard. Look at the angle of the bristles. You can see how they're getting really pressed into the paint and going back and forth. And this is where I don't mind if there are any streaks at all, because it's building up a really nice sense of a flat plane, which is a contrast to that really bright looking sky and the curve in the sky. And this will give us a sense of the flat sand of the beach before the water arrives, before the sea comes in. Now, the one paint we haven't used yet is the blue, and I've held off on using any blue because I know this is a really powerful, strong colour. And as soon as I get it on the brush, anywhere that I touch with the brush will have this blue. So we've held right back, and I am going to take the tiniest amount on the corner. Remember I said Always start with a small amount of pigment and build up. It's much easier to add colour in than it is to take it away. And I'm going to start in the very, very top left corner, just making a little dot there and scrubbing that in a little bit. And when I can see what's happening with the colour, then I will start to bring it over the pink a little bit. Now, if you find that your white background has now dried up, as mine has, we just take a little bit of additional white. Don't put water on there. Take some white and mix it in. It will, or just stroke it over the top. It will change the colour slightly, but it will give you that little bit of moisturisation that you need to allow the colours to keep moving. Now I feel more confident adding in a bit more blue, especially with that dilution of the white. And I just want to have that sense of change of tone. Now I'm mixing in very, very lightly because I can feel that there's a pull in the paint as it's dried quite significantly since I last worked on it. If you're getting drag marks, if you're getting the paint pulling away, just pause or add in more white and then put a bit of additional pink back in so you don't lose that intensity of colour with the dilution of the white. And very often any little marks, so you can probably see there at the top, there's a bit of a drag mark in the bristle with the bristles into the paint. And I don't worry about that when the paint is wet, because when it dries, it's going to look very different anyway. Acrylic darkens slightly, but also that might not be noticeable when it's dry. Equally, I'm aware that I want to be painting over the top of this with some palette knife texture. But if you feel that there are some areas where the paint has got very thin, and when it dries, you can see the thinness of the paint and the marks with your bristles, the best thing to do is to do another layer, is to redo the sky, having that as your background and regarding it as practice. And then the next time you do it, you'll know you just need to have slightly thicker white, slightly a bit more paint going on so you don't get those really thin marks in there. Sometimes we just need to practice over the top of what we've done and feel that it's all valuable learning experience, and nothing is ever a waste of paint. If you have to do a second layer over the top, this will create the most wonderful background tone, which will show through. It might show through in some areas if you do another thin layer over the top, but it's all really helpful practice. And the more confident you get at doing it and understanding what happens with your paints, the fewer times you'll need to redo a layer if you just have one tiny little area that feels like it's ruining the look. Now, just to finish off this first preparatory layer, I'm going to keep going with my blue. And I'm not worried too much about the exact line of the horizon at this stage, because we are going to use some masking tape to get that really nice and straight. But I will draw underneath the horizon there. I'm not going to do it right on the horizon. This gives me a chance to work up. But there, using that bit of blue, and it's almost impossible to draw a straight line. Almost impossible, and this is probably going off at a real angle all the way down, but that is a good guideline. So taking blue line all the way across, you can see how dry it is. It's not a problem because this is creating the plan on the painting, the background layer. So next time we approach it, we've already got something there and we feel excited and confident about where it's going. So to fill in all of this area and make a good impression for my eye, for my brain, of where the different areas of the composition are going to be, I'm just going to take a little bit more white, cake mix through the blue. Because the blue is such a powerful pigment, you can use a fair bit of white and you'll still get a real intensity of colour. So I'm cake mixing all the way along, but see how I'm keeping the brush underneath that horizon line, just so I don't get higher and higher and higher and start mixing into that lovely sky. So I'm going to bring the blue right down to my sandy layer and even just take it over the edge. Now, of course, those peachy tones, those reds and yellows, are mixing in with the blue because it's still a little bit wet and creating a slightly greeny tone. Doesn't matter. This is all background and planning. So I've just taken some more pure blue. See how, again, I'm following the horizontal plane of the canvas. So I'm following the bottom edge in long streaks, going all the way across, and more white, cake mixing white through. Haven't quite decided where the water is going to come in, what the islands are going to look like, but this is giving me a good sense of colour and scale and shape for this work. So I'm taking lots of white that's mixed in with the blue, a little bit of a cake mix, but really just back and forth to fill in that whole block, taking it over the beach slightly. I'm not at all worried about streaks in this. And there, we already, in a relatively short space of time, but with some patience and with some subtle mixing, we've created this gorgeous, bright, vibrant painting, which gives us some exceptional clues about what we want to do next and where the light source is. That's really important, that you have a bright area, you have a slightly darker area, and from that we can work outwards and start building up a really beautiful painting. Okay, so if you need to do any further work on this first layer, you carry on with that and I'll see you in the next one. Have fun!